And we are back, my friends. Welcome back to the channel Free Thinkers. This time we will talk a little bit about Judaism. Judaism, the great inspiration for the other two monotheistic religions, which is of course Christianity and Islam. In the last videos I was mentioning, we were talking about a little bit about Christianity, a little bit about Islam. So we were mentioning that Christianity is European reinterpretation of Judaism, okay, mixed with many, European dates and traditions, etc. And Islam, being an Arab version of Judaism, with blending Platonic philosophy with Christian concepts. So, what is so special about Judaism? To answer this question, we need to consider the central idea of the religion, which is, the claim that there is only one God. So, what is it about this idea? What is it about that being, about that God? In Judaism, that's of course Yahweh. So, who or what was Yahweh? Where did he came from? What was his evolution? To know that Yahweh was not the one and only God. Yahweh belonged actually to a pantheon of gods. Yahweh was one of the gods of that early Canaanite Jewish Hebrew pantheon. Yahweh was actually the god of war and the god of thunder, often depicted as riding thunder. Something similar actually, to the Greek thunder god, or to the Roman thunder god, or actually many other cultures. In many cultures, there were gods who were associated with the sky, with thunderstorms, etc. The Slavic also people had their, thunder god. The Scandinavian peoples also, and many others. So similar in, all these other pantheons, there was one chief deity in this Canaanite pantheon. It was the god El. Okay, it was not Yahweh, it was El. And with El meaning, literally meaning the god. And that deity was depicted as an older wise man. So today, if you ask people who are subscribing to one of the monotheistic religions, if you ask them, about the idea of God, many of them think about an old wise man being somewhere in the sky. And that's literally the picture, the idea of El. He was depicted, as I said, as an older wise man with, long gray hair, long beard also. Yahweh will eventually, the ideas of Yahweh and El will in time merge. Many of the attributes of El will be incorporated in Yahweh. For example, the imagery. And also, one should note that El and Yahweh were very much different. Very much different. El being, the patient, all-loving, wise, forgiving God or deity. But Yahweh being God of war, he was a jealous deity, a deity who liked revenge, who was enjoying very much, the destruction of his enemies. And in fact, by reading the Old Testament, we can find many of the artifacts of such a a war, a war deity Yahweh. So we can trace back that Yahweh was not this all-loving, forgiving God that the Christians later on will be associating him with. So he was actually, a god of war. One more interesting thing about Yahweh is also that Yahweh was not alone, so to say. Yahweh had a consort, a female consort, of course. That is also an interesting fact. Also, artifacts of this female consort of his were found in Yahweh's temples. Pre-monotheistic Yahweh, that being. So one more interesting thing about Canaanite pantheon was that the chief deity El had quasi-divine helpers, scribes, generally bureaucrats, and also one chief prosecutor, let's say, and that being Satan or Satan. Now, how did that idea of the chief prosecutor Satan morph into later the concept of Satan the devil? We can only imagine. In Christianity, Satan being the evil opposite of God, actually. It's fascinating that Satan, if you think about it, represents another God. Some would say that Christianity is also a dualism religion, meaning that too many powers are being ascribed to Satan, so that Satan becomes a deity of his own, not only a fallen angel, but actually a deity, because he can act on his own against the will of God, which is, if you think about it, somewhat counterintuitive. The concept of Satan makes actually a little bit more sense in Islam, in terms of Satan being subordinated to God, which means that Satan can absolutely do nothing without the will of God, which then makes one wonder, is God doing the bad deeds? So in Christianity is, how to say, primary questions would be, why is God allowing evil? Why is God not doing anything against evil? But in Islam, the same question would be formulated as, is God doing all that evil in the world? Is God actually deceiving? Is God scheming against people? So if you go back to the source, which is, for these two religions, Judaism, Satan was actually only the scribe of the chief deity El. So there you have it. Devil, the devil, Satan's helpers, demons, this is all bull crap. Okay? One fascinating thing about early Judaism was that there was no concept of afterlife. The idea of afterlife or the soul or being rewarded or punished came actually later, and some people argue that it was because of the influence of early Christians and early Christian concepts that new ideas were incorporated into Judaism, also back incorporated into Judaism, because Christians had this idea of the coming apocalypse, the counting of good deeds, bad deeds, punishment, rewards, etc. So taking all this into consideration, and I'm not going too much into detail, this is just a very brief shooting of facts, let's say. one can clearly see that, and of course also reading the Old Testament and speaking with people of a particular religion, one can draw the conclusion that monotheism and monotheistic religions are actually an evolution. Okay, evolution. So there wasn't such a thing as the ultimate first monotheistic religion and then maybe sparking other ones. It was all evolution and reinterpretation of previous ideas. In fact, Judaism was not the first monotheistic religion. If we are looking back, Egyptians had, some very first ideas about one God, about some monotheistic concepts, that being the sun, the ultimate God, the sun God. But the Sumerians also, had many ideas that were later picked up, by the Jews and many other religions. So we can say that Sumerians' religion, if we can call it a religion, a belief system, is in fact the first precursor to, all these other religions, not Judaism. Okay, friends, so this is it for this one. I hope you had fun in this little chat. I hope you learned something new. And never forget to stay free. You have to stay free, especially up here. Never accept statements from anybody, especially not if, from someone older or someone smarter or higher in the hierarchy. Always double check your information and always think for yourselves. If something resonates with you, accept it. But if you have doubts, always double check, always. So, see you in the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe because many new videos are coming. Stay free.